Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you would mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that immensely. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a question to ask, or if you want to suggest a video topic, or want to tell me how you do things, or just have some constructive criticism, all those things are great. I really love it when people tell me that they're getting things out of the channel. That's nice to hear and gratifying to find out. So thanks for those things in advance. So a while back, one of my patrons sent me some really pretty amethysts, and so I have a whole bunch of those, and I've been using them up gradually, but I thought I'd make an amethyst ring today. And I kind of want to do one I've seen somewhere commercially, I don't remember where, but I'm going to try and do something similar to that. It's got two pear-shaped stones, or two teardrop stones, and I think it's going to be a kind of a simple project, and maybe a good project to practice making bezel settings for faceted stones, in particular teardrop shaped ones, because they have that sharp point on them. But either way, I think it'll be a pretty project, and I hope you enjoy it. Before we start, I wanted to thank some people. First, my patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I have a brand new one. Her name is Nina. Thank you for signing up, Nina. I really appreciate your support. I think that you'll find a marvelous group of people over there with a lot of talent and who are very friendly, so enjoy the community. And thanks to all of my patrons for all of their support. My YouTube subscribers, we passed 19,900, which is pretty exciting because we're almost to 20,000 subscribers. That's amazing and sort of baffling to me, but thank you for that. I do really appreciate your support, and I love the comments that you leave, and the super thanks and the buy me a coffees really help with the cost of materials, so thank you for that. And thank you for all of your kind comments. All right, well, let's get started on this project. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get over on my merch store if you're interested. They're a great way to keep track of your projects, and the recent ones have convenient charts on the back, some of them. This one has a conversion chart between fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, which I find super useful. I also like how they have this dot matrix background. It allows me to keep things sort of symmetrical when that's not my strongest suit. So I just noticed that I'm on my last page on this one, so I'm going to have to break out my next one, which I think is going to be this one that has the American wire gauge to inches to millimeters, which I also find pretty useful, since I know a lot of people overseas don't use gauges. So, all right, so this is a pretty simple one, and I pre-made one of the bezels just to save time, since we're going to be doing two of the same. And here's the other stone. Oops. I'm just going to give you a peek at it. They're nice amethysts. And these ones are about 9 by 6.5. I think they're probably meant to be cut 9 by 7. But they're a little bit shy of that, I think. So I have two of them. And we're going to make a little step bezel. So I was saying this might be a good one to practice your pear shape or your teardrop shape step bezels for faceted stones. I do this in a couple of different ways. Somebody asked me about this the other day. Most of the time I just do layers of 18 gauge round wire soldered one on top of each other to get the elevation that I need for the little step on the inside of the bezel. And that's what I did on this one. Here's an example though where I took a piece of flattened 14 gauge square wire and just soldered it in. It gives you pretty much the same look from the bottom. And it serves the same purpose. So I generally do it this way because I've been doing it this way for so long. There's no real reason that I have to do it that way though. So both ways work pretty well. Alright, so our first step is going to be to make the second bezel for this one. And like I said, I'm going to be using some basic materials. 14 gauge square wire, which equates to about 1.6 millimeters. I'm going to be using 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, and that is 4.76 millimeters tall. I of course file it down to the appropriate height for the the stone. And the thickness I'm using is 26 gauge, which equates to 0.41 millimeters, if I recall. I meant to write that down and I didn't. So our first step then is going to be to make a bezel for this stone here. And we'll start with that. I keep hearing scampering from upstairs. I think one of my cats has the zoomies. Okay, so when I'm doing a bezel for one of these kind of stones that have a point on them, or actually anything that has kind of a sharp point to it, I never do the bezel itself right on that point where the two ends come together. That's not going to be where they connect. I'm going to connect it somewhere along the side over here. It's hard to get that to work very well if you do it right at the top there because of the solder that goes in there, and you know, getting it to when you go to set the stone, it's sometimes hard to get that spot to lay down nicely or look nice. So if you have it in the side, it is less troublesome. So I'm going to start by making kind of a V shape like that, and so you see the solder joint will end up right on the side over here. But in order to make this part of the teardrop, I'm just going to kind of do this. Kind of let the wire do the work. See how close we are. A little bit more tightening up to do, I think. I don't want it so tight. When you have a sharp corner like this on a teardrop or a marquee or a sharp square stone, those corners are a little bit fragile and easy to break off. So you want your bezel to be the right size, but you don't want it to be so tight that when you push the stone in, you snap those off. That's always requires a profanity intermission when something like that happens, and some self-recrimination for knowing better. If you look at my playlists over on my main channel page, you'll find that I have things split up into, you know, easy projects, sort of intermediate projects, and more difficult projects. So you know, you can kind of sort through those. Again, those are kind of arbitrary categories for me because everybody's got different skill levels and different places and what they know how to do. But it may help to guide you as far as some projects if you're a beginner, or you know, if you already know have got some practice soldering and stuff, you already know the basics and you want to try some more advanced projects, you might do the intermediate list and try some of those there. I normally make these angular. I just left the bottom round right there, so I'm not sure why I did that. Not following my usual plan, I guess. Okay, so if you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder. Where did I stick that? Looks like this. And what I just applied to this bezel here is called flux, and I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle like that. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It just has one tank of acetylene, and it draws in atmospheric air through there and mixes it with the gas so it burns better. And it's a great torch for silversmithing. And I use a #1 tip, and that's most of the questions that people generally ask me. So I'm just going to put a little square of this hard silver sheet solder on top of that. And we'll just heat it, kind of the entire piece like this. Keep the heat moving and you usually have the best results. Then we can just cool this off and shape it. I get comments periodically that I make this look really easy, and you got to keep in mind that after doing it for about 30 years, making bezels and stuff like that is pretty routine for me. So give yourself some grace and accept that it takes a little while to get things so routine for you that you don't even have to really think much about it. And people are pretty hard on themselves sometimes, so don't be that way to yourself, because it takes a while to get the hang of things. I usually tell people, bezels are frustrating at first, or they were for me. And so I usually tell people, make about 30 bezels before you start to question whether this is for you. So you kind of develop those scripts or muscle memories or whatever that after a while you don't have to think too much about it, and it makes everything easier. So let's put it in there. Sometimes it's hard to gauge because the pavilion of the stone doesn't sit flat when you just don't have a bottom of it here. I think we're within the size range. I think I got it pretty close. And our next step is going to be to find some 18 gauge round wire, like I said earlier. And I'm going to make 2 teardrop shaped little kind of pieces out of that, and then we'll solder them into the bottom of the bezel to create that platform for the stone to sit on. 20 or 18? That's 18. With these ones, for this inner wire, I think we can end it on the point on this one and be okay. So let's, I'm going to use my bail making pliers here to get kind of a loop on one end. Yeah. I'm just going to pull it around like this. Kind of a teardrop shape. And then we can change the size as we need it to be. Oops. That's a little bit closer. So let's do this. Let's cut off both of those ends. And this is going to be a little bit too big still. I can look at it and kind of get an estimate of how much I need to take off of there. So I think I'm going to snip just a little bit more off of each side. And then I want these to come together to kind of a point. So let's open it up just a little bit. And you can either use a jeweler's file. I finally broke down and bought myself a new half round. It's been a few years since I did, so these are double cuts, so I can go back and forth like this. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of file that inner edge a little flat towards itself, or towards the other side, I should say. See where we're at here size-wise. Whenever I do that, I keep misshaping the ring. I need to do a better job than that. That looks pretty close. So let's make a second one of those, and then we'll stack it right on top of that. One thing you want to make sure to do though is make sure that this is all in a single flat plane so that you have a nice flat platform for your stone to sit on. You will thank yourself later. Alright, let's make another one of these. If you have trouble filing little things like this, you can clamp it in a miter vise jig and just have the end sticking out, and then you can have something a little more substantial to hold on to, if that helps you. Whichever one fits snugly in there and looks the best, I'm going to put on the bottom. Looks pretty good, still sitting pretty flat. So, with these kind of things, where you have just a little bit of solder that needs to get drawn up in there, we can actually flux it and then set it on top of a couple of pieces of solder, and when we heat it, it should pull it right up in there, which I thought was a cool trick when I first realized that. Okay, so let's get this fluxed. If you are new to this, probably doing a faceted stone for your first setting is not the best choice. There's plenty of projects with cabochons that you can choose from if you go to the main page. This would be more kind of an advanced beginner or early intermediate category. Someone who's got a few bezels under their belt. Okay. So we'll just set it on top of those. And just like a regular bezel, I'm going to heat it around the outside. You don't want to overheat it. I've actually, over the years a few times, because the wire I'm using on the inside is sterling and the wire on the outside is fine silver. If you overheat it, you can actually melt that wire on the inside because it's got a slightly lower melting temperature than fine silver. And then you'll have to start over probably, because it'll start to disperse over the inside of the bezel and not really create a nice platform for you. So if something weird goes on like that, you probably just overheated it a little bit. You'll notice it's a little too deep, which I knew it would be. So let's do a little bit of filing. I'm going to make sure we get a nice clean seam all the way around by filing off the excess. I always like to file this until it doesn't look like a piece of round wire anymore. See, that's got a nice clean look to it now. I'm going to take the top down a little bit too. I think we're pretty good so far. So I'm not going to go any further until we're towards the end, so I don't overdo it. We can set these stones up here. So I'm going to use some 14 gauge for the band. So when I'm looking at this, we've got one of these that tapers down and merges with the stone, and the other side of it ends up going flat into to kind of continue that. Same way over here on this other one. So one side needs to be tapered that way. So I think first what I'll do is on these two, I cut them to be, I think it was about an 8.5 or something like that. But I knew that I could cut it down shorter if I wanted it to be smaller after we have these all attached. So I think my first step is going to be to straighten these out, and then we'll cut them to be the exact same length. And then I'll file one side so it tapers off to kind of a flat edge on the other side there like that. Now let's get these straight. When I'm straightening a square wire like this, I usually hold it with these flat nose pliers and then use my fingers to straighten the wire. And just use the pliers to kind of hold it so I have some leverage. And you can switch where you're holding it to get, you know, get it to bend in different spots. But I'm not taking the pliers and bending it like that. That usually doesn't work very well. That leads to mangled wire. Doesn't have to be too perfect, but I do want them to be the same length. So let's make sure they're pretty close. That's pretty close, actually. Alright, so on one side of these, I'm going to take my file and just file it. It gradually tapers down to a point going from one direction. Don't do that, though. So I think let's try and get these to start curving inwards at about the same spot. And let's do this and mark it right about there. Right about there. And I think I'm going to curve them inwards towards the side I just filed. But then these ones have to turn back towards the other side. So I have a feeling I'm going to have to cut these off, or cut these shorter, but for now, actually let's cut just a little bit off. So kind of like that. It needs to start separating it out pretty close to the end. So I think we don't need to go very far down. Maybe, I don't know, 5 millimeters or so. Let's see what that looks like. I guess we'll see what happens. So I need to turn it towards the side that bends inwards. Just a little bit. I think I'm going to have to cut those off shorter, but that's probably okay. So let's go about like that, and we'll solder those together, and then we'll see what we need to do after that. I think about like that. So let's do this. I'm going to make that black with a Sharpie. Line this up how I want it to be. About like that. And then make a little scratch right where it needs to be cut off, right like that. So I was going to solder this on flat like this. The more I think about it, I want this to curve naturally up here so that we don't have too much of a flat spot underneath these guys. So maybe let's round this out and do it another way. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, but let's see how it works. What's the worst thing that could happen? Whoops. That wasn't very good. That looks pretty decent. So I'm going to do something called pick soldering now, which is where I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of the pick, heat all of this up to the correct temperature in theory, and touch a bit of solder where it needs to go. It's a unique and super useful way of delivering solder to a particular spot in the amount that you want. If you're interested, put a link up there for you. There's a video about it. So let's cut a little bit more solder. Once I learned how to do that, it made things a lot easier. So I think it's worth investing the time to practice that. It's tempting to ignore this band when you're trying to solder up on the top there, but the band has got most of the mass in it, so I want that to really stick to these guys. Need to get it all up to the 1450-ish degrees, 730 or something, I think, centigrade. Oops, I have to put that one back. I think I didn't get it where I need it to be. Let's see how this all comes together. May have to do a little bit of filing adjustment on some of these angles. I soldered this one up a little too high, so I'm going to have to correct that. First, let's see if we can get these ones soldered up. Where nothing's likely to move. So I'm just going to kind of suspend it on this third hand here. Nothing can move too much then. And let's get those other ones soldered on, and then we'll figure out how to fix them. I'm going to see if I can get this hot enough to where I can push that down a little bit, or lift the bezel up a little bit. It's looking a little better. Let's round this out a bit. This came out far bigger than I anticipated. But I thought it might. I figured I'd cut some pieces out. That's a little more where I kind of want it to be. Okay, I'm going to let that pickle, and then we'll get it cleaned up a little better, polished up, and then I'll probably set one of the stones in front of you. So I'll be back. Okay, I went ahead and set this one here. This one, I've got it filed down to about where it needs to be, and I do this a little differently than some people do. I use my chain nose pliers, the outside edges. And to start with, I'm going to kind of push that tip down a little bit, just a little. Make sure that it stays sitting flat, and then I'm just going to use this flat side to kind of gently steer that top edge inwards a little bit. If you need to, you can secure it in a vise of some sort. If you need to, on these points, sometimes it's hard to deal with corners on bezels. And if you file it just a little bit thinner, right at the top of that tip, it gives you a little less volume to try and force into that small of a space, and it makes it just a little bit easier. The last stage is called burnishing, and I'm going to use a rounded outer edge there. Kind of rub top, right where the stone and the bezel meet. Not scratching the stone, but kind of putting quite a bit of pressure on the bezel so that it really lays tight against there. I like it. You know, it's one of those things, sometimes when you do like even numbered components, it looks weird. And I think this one actually looks pretty good. So you tell me what you think. It was a good project, good for practicing, you know, making settings for pear shapes or teardrop shapes. And overall, a pleasing outcome. So, all right, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Oh, and I also will use the blue fine silicone polishing wheel to kind of clean up the top edge of the bezel here before I take pictures. Okay, well that was a two-stone teardrop amethyst ring. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And I'd love it if you'd go over to my main channel page. I have been doing this for about 3 years, and I do 3 videos per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturdays. So there's tons of content over there, and there's almost certainly something else you'll enjoy. So check out some of those videos and make sure to subscribe to my channel. And also visit the video description down below. There's some important links there if you want to find out more about my Patreon, which is a great group of people over there and a nice artistic community. There's a link to that. There's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to all of the videos I did in 2024. That includes about 170 plus videos, and it includes things like a materials list for the project, a before picture, like my sketch that I draw, as well as a finished product picture, a subjective sort of difficulty rating that I give it, as well as some notes about the project itself, like things I might have done differently, or if I liked the end result, or what might have worked better had I tried it in a different way or something. So there's lots of stuff like that, and I think it's a really valuable resource. It gives you access to a whole bunch of tutorials that are interesting and fun, and it's a great way to support my channel. So check that out. There's also a link to my merch store where you can get those nice design idea books if you want to get yourself one of those. I found those invaluable lately, and I keep track of all of my projects anymore, so I always have a record to go back to if I want to try and recreate something or do something similar. So get yourself 1 or 2 of those. They're great. And then make sure to visit again. So thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.